Thank you so much. And also thank you for this invitation to speak here. Coming to Rotary is always like coming back home. In many ways, I kind of grew up with Rotaract, so it's like being in family every time I'm with Rotarians. And of course, in the recent years, as a Peace Fellow and as a Peace Fellow alumni, we've been connecting very actively with Rotary clubs around the world. So it's also great to have an opportunity to bring in the message of the alumni to this platform. So I was asked by Mr. Ruya to speak about the Peace Fellowship, so which is what I will share. I imagine most of you, particularly in this club, are very familiar with the Peace Fellowship given Mr. Ruya's involvement. So it's possible that some of what I share is perhaps information known to all of you. But let me start with that in any case, just to bring us all on the same page. And I'll make sure that we have enough time for interaction towards the end of the session so that we can have more of a conversation around questions you might have around what Peace Fellows do or any other thoughts that you may have around the fellowship. So let me share my screen. So, of course, the Peace Fellowship doesn't really need any introduction, particularly to your club. So you know that it's a DRF foundation-funded program. And currently we have 8 peace centers. The 8th one, the last one is an addition which happened this year, and they're going to begin their first cohort in 2021. So we have 6 of these peace centers that offer master's degree programs, and 2 of the centers offer certification programs, which are often referred to as the short-term programs. And in the Asian context, the closest peace center that we have is in Thailand, in Chulalongkorn, of which I'm an alumni. And we also have ICU in Japan, which is in the Asian context. Otherwise, the rest of the centers are spread across the world. I know there have been conversations for a long time around looking at a peace center in India, but hopefully one day we'll have something to talk about in that direction as well. So just to familiarize all of you with the program, particularly with the intention of you being able to locate candidates and inviting them to apply for the fellowship, it might be useful to understand what is it that the peace centers look for. So the programs, as I said, there are 2 of them. One is referred to as the long-term program. It's a master's degree program, which 6 of these universities offer. And the master's program, depending upon the university, it's either a full 2 years master's course, or in some universities, it's about a year and a half. So that's the longer duration. And usually the master's program is taken up by people that are towards the beginning of their careers, usually about 3 to 5 years of work experience is what we're looking at for the master's degree programs. And of course, it's not that the universities reject older candidates. There have been much older candidates as well, but that's a minimal requirement that you have about 3 to 5 years of work experience. And the master's program is usually there are about 50 fellows that are invited into the master's degrees program. And the certification program, which is referred to as the short-term program, is it's about a year long overall, but the residential component of it is just about 12 weeks, about 3 months is what you need to spend at the universities, and then the rest of it is virtual contact where you come back to your home base and you work on the projects, and there is virtual contact, and then you briefly go back to the university at the end of the program just to make your final presentations. So that's the certification process. And Overall, the upper limit that the foundation has had for a few years is an intake of 130 candidates between these two programs, the long and the short term. This year, in the 2021 cohort, we had an intake of about 117 candidates. It of course includes Aziz, who's here in the meeting as well. And so yeah, that's an overall sense of what the programs are about. If you're looking for potential candidates in in your circles or around you who can apply and benefit from the program, what we're looking for is people that are proficient in English. All of these programs are in English, so that's unfortunately a requirement. In Japan, the program at the International Christian University also requires the candidates to undergo a foundational course in Japanese because some of their lectures happen in Japanese. However, that fluency is not required at the time of applications. If the candidate gets selected, then they're asked to undergo a foundational program before they fly off. So even if so long as you have people proficient in English, they can at least apply for the fellowship. All the master's degree programs require the candidates to have a bachelor's degree and some degree of exposure to work in development or peace or conflict resolution, as the case may be. None of these universities need specific experience only in peace building, so long as it's broadly in a sector allied to peace, they're open to inviting the candidates. And when they say demonstrated leadership skills, what they mean is largely around have there been initiatives from the side of the candidate, and that initiative could be as a volunteer in an organization. It could be initiatives that they've taken up independently, projects that they've managed to pick up themselves. It could also be initiatives taken under the umbrella of the organization that they are employed with. The leadership is not necessarily in terms of any kind of a designation in their organizations that they may be employed with. And pretty much all of these master's programs, the universities prefer that they have roughly about 3 years of work experience minimum, so that there is a context to what they will learn in the fellowship. And Duke, UNC in the US requires, or they prefer people with a little more experience. They usually tend to pick up candidates with about 5 years of work experience. And so that's what you need to look for in a candidate when you're suggesting them to apply for the fellowship. As far as the certificate program is concerned, again, the bachelor's degree and the English language proficiency is a must. Similar kind of work context is what is looked for. Most certification program candidates tend to have, of course, they say a minimum of 5 years of experience, but from what I know, the cohort is usually much older. So, for example, back in 2013, when I did the fellowship in Chula, my cohort, I think the average age was about 42. So there are people who come in with about easily 15, 20 years of work experience as well. So the certificate program is largely tailored for people that are already practicing professionals in the space of peace and conflict. And so as I mentioned earlier, that there are 2 universities that offer the short-term program. One is Chulalongkorn in Thailand. The other, the latest edition, is Makerere University in Uganda. However, at Makerere, currently the program is tailored to Africa, and therefore they largely encourage African professionals to apply. If a person is not African but is based in Africa for work, they're also open to such candidates as well. So But yeah, potentially they're looking for candidates who will go back and work in some part of Africa, because the the conflict in Africa is in that sense very different from that of the rest of the world, from a socio-economic and also from a cultural perspective. So the program is tailored to their needs. And yeah, so that's in terms of both the programs from a requirement perspective. I must say both of these programs, and I can specifically talk about the certification process, which I did. There is, of course, a very heavy academic component in both of these programs. So you do spend a lot of time in the day studying. So like typically the schedule at Chula is 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. of classes. And I'm told that it's a similar sort of a schedule for the master's program as well. So you spend almost a whole day of classes, and then there are assignments and field visits and other things that are allied to it. In terms of the alumni, at this point we have about 1,400 alumni spread across the world, and of course that number adds every year by about 110, 120 people that get added to the alumni. And a huge chunk of them, as you see, 36% of them are allied to some kind of a non-governmental or non-profit organization, and that they either are employed or they consult with such organizations. So that forms a huge chunk of the candidate profile, naturally, because of the nature of the work. And then there are all sorts of other professions which are in some ways allied or linked to peace building as well. So we have a lot of teachers, academicians in the context of peace and conflict studies. You have people from the government. For example, the alumni who are based in Mumbai, a lot of them are in government and law enforcement. We have people that are researchers and academics. So a lot of our master's degree program participants tend to go on to study PhD in peace building. There are people that work with UN agencies, there are journalists, and yeah, lawyers and several other kinds of professionals as well. So it's a very eclectic mix of people, and usually the interactions with the alumni are very rich because they bring in extremely varied perspectives around peace and around development. How do we apply? If you're scouting for candidates, please make sure that you do it around this time of the year, because the application typically begins somewhere in February, and from February till about May, the applications are open online. In our district, of course, we've had this tradition, given Mr. Ruria's diligence, we've made sure that the candidates apply through the district and they are vetted, and the alumni speak to potential candidates, help them with their application and so on, which is a very streamlined process. That is not so in most other parts of the world. It's a rarity in our district. In most other parts of the world, candidates apply directly on the website because the application is open to everybody. And then depending upon where they are based, they are connected with the closest Rotary district that they may have. In most cases, it happens to be somewhere around them geographically. Sometimes the closest club is in another country, so there are cases where that happens as well. And so the candidate can independently fill out the application form. There is a lot of detailing that is needed in terms of at least 3 essays that are required to prove the application, in terms of why are they applying to this, what is their intention, do they intend to come back to the home country and work, and so on. So there's a lot of detailing that is expected. And the expectation of the district is simply to endorse the application. So From an RI perspective, the expectation is simply that you get in touch with the candidate and make sure that it's a genuine person and that they're actually doing the work that they claim to do, and then you simply the governor endorses the candidate. That's usually the process, and they're tagged to a sponsor club. In our case, of course, I'm sure a lot of you are also involved in this process, where we look at the applications, we talk one-to-one with each candidate, work with them in terms of their essays and so on. And there's also an interview that happens with a panel that includes the DG, the alumni, a lot of Rotarians. I'm sure some of you are here. So it's a fairly detailed process that we follow, and no wonder we've had a fairly high success rate over the years in terms of the number of people that get through this district. And with the and typically the results, once the applications are done, the results are usually declared around end of October, early November, so that candidates have enough time to prepare in terms of managing their absence from home and work. And for the short-term programs, once you're selected, then you directly go on to doing the program. With the master's degree programs, the candidates, once selected, need to formally apply to the university, because that's a university requirement. There's no chance of rejection in that process because they've been selected into the fellowship. But yeah, the university sometimes has, some universities have requirements around GMAT or GRE scores and TOEFL scores and so on. So there is a separate university application process that needs to be followed through for the master's degree candidates. So that's broadly the process. So this is a great time for all of you to start scouting for the right kind of people that you believe are eligible for these programs. These are some links, and I want to talk a little more about them, and I'll leave the links on the chat box as well later so that you can refer to them. But largely, what I want to focus on is and celebrate the fact that eventually, after all these years, we finally managed to formulate and register the Rotary Peace Fellows Alumni Association. It's registered in the US, and it's registered as a separate entity, separate from DRF and from RI. And the idea for registering an alumni association happened last year in June at the International Assembly in Hamburg, and we've been trying to form the alumni association for a long time, but somehow things weren't coming together. There weren't enough number of people to form it, but eventually it happened, and now it's been doing a lot of work in the lockdown. So we formed it just in time for us to be able to capitalize on the situation that was to follow. Of course, we couldn't have predicted it back then, but the lockdown in many ways gave us an opportunity to really come together and work actively towards peace building. So some of the links which I'll share later on chat that I wanted to draw your attention to is firstly the Facebook page of the Alumni Association, and the reason I'm asking you to follow it is because we do a lot of online events and webinars around peace building, and it is open to public in general, but we specifically encourage Rotarians and Rotractors to come into these programs. All of them are free of charge. And it's a great way to understand what peace building is about, because a lot of times there are questions around what exactly do you do as a peace builder. So, and there are so many shades of it that it's difficult to give a simple linear answer around it. So it'll be great if you could attend some of the webinars that we do. They're typically done over the weekend. Under the Asia chapter, we've been doing about 2 webinars a month. One is usually showcasing peace builders of different kinds, not necessarily peace fellows, but other kind of peace building work as well. And in the last few months, once a month, we've also been showcasing films related to peace and then having discussions around that. So that might be of interest to some of you. Uh, Another database that I'd like to draw your attention to is the Rotary Peace Fellows database, which is compiled through RI, through the foundation. And that has details of Peace Fellows who are willing to speak at Rotary clubs around the kind of work that they do. And that's something you can access as well if you'd like to invite more Peace Fellows to speak about the work that they do. And it's a very broad mix of people from around the world doing all kinds of work. So it might be interesting for you to explore that database as well. And then, of course, there's the Alumni Association website where there are a lot of details around the kind of events that we've been doing, and also a lot of recordings of the previous webinars and conferences that we've had. So one great success that I'd like to share on behalf of the alumni this year was this Global Cyber Peace Conference that we managed to pull off in a matter of about 4 weeks. So it was something that we were ideating for a while in terms of given that we were unable to meet at the assembly, we were wondering how do we come together. And we thought we can do an online conference just for Peace Fellows. And that's how the conversation started sometime around May this year. And then we said, okay, we'll probably try and do a conference perhaps in August, July or August or something. And then we were requested by RI that the outgoing president would like for the conference to happen within his term, and that's how this conference had to be organized in about 4 weeks' time. But amazingly, the way people came together from around the world, it got really quickly organized into a 24-hour peace conference because we wanted to keep it going across time zones. So we started off at about 8 a.m. Australia time, and it went to about 8 p.m. US time. So it was actually more than 24 hours. It went on to about 30 hours if you look at the total content time. And when we started planning for this, we said, okay, maybe, we've just got about 3-4 weeks. We'll be happy even if about 100-120 Peace Fellows managed to attend it. But we kept spreading the word nevertheless, and we ended up with more than 1,500 participants from around the world, which for us was a hugely encouraging piece. And again, 1,500 in the sense that 1,500 was the amount of registrants that are the platform that conference platform that we were using, that was capped at 1,500 registrants. And after that, we kept letting people in without any data on our behalf. So we had a minimum of 1,500, but yeah, a lot of the sessions in that conference had hundreds of participants. So yeah, that was a huge success, and we managed to showcase a lot of great work that our alumni are doing, and also other peace builders from around the world are doing. So, and we're already in the process of planning for the 2021 Peace Conference. So if your club would like to be involved in any way whatsoever in terms of Rotarians wanting to be involved in planning or content or any of that, do let me know. We'll be happy to have you there. One thing we missed this time was Rotarian involvement. I think it was a little too last minute, and most Rotary clubs that we approached weren't quite ready to do something in such a short term. But this is an open invitation. If you'd like to partner for the next year's conference in any way, please do so. We'd be happy to have your partnership in that process. And yeah, we've been, the webinars that I was talking to you about, we've been doing a wide variety of them. Like the one of the last webinars that we did, I think last month, was showcasing the work of a dairy cooperative in Telangana, and how the dairy cooperative has been working in terms of creating gender parity and peace building around tribal communities in that area in Telangana. So that's been a very interesting case study, and we brought in ground level workers from there to talk about the kind of work that they have been doing. Otherwise, in the recent months, we've had webinars showcasing people from smaller islands in the Pacific and in Micronesia. And they've spoken about the impact of climate change in those islands. A lot of these islands have climate refugees that are forced to evacuate because these islands are really small and low-lying, and they have no chance of survival unless they relocate to another country. And that was a very touching webinar that we did. Another very beautiful webinar was where we brought in some of the last living survivors of the atomic bombing in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Most of them are about 80, 90 years old, and we worked with them over a few months to make them comfortable with using Zoom and speaking to a screen, and they did a beautiful job of giving their message across in terms of peace, and how, in spite of the fact that they faced something very violent in their lives when they were really young, they still continue to believe in non-violence and peace. And that was a beautiful webinar. And the recordings of all of these are available on the website. So I'd encourage you to look that up as well. So yeah, that's broadly some of the work that we have been doing as alumni. And beyond this, I'm happy to take questions or engage in any other way you'd like to.
Thank you.
You're muted, sir. I can't hear you.
Yeah, thank you, Rukmini ji. It was a nice thing. There are many people who will have questions, as you said, that I think past President Rotarian Krishna Kejriwal has questions.
Yes, Krishna ji, can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah, I will do that.
Yeah.
My one question was that you mentioned that you all have done a lot of work during the lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what sort of work have you all really done during the lockdown? That is number one. Number two was basically that when we talk about conflict resolution, now the ongoing farmers' agitation is also a conflict.
Yeah.
Will you be talking to them, or will it be considered too political to be solving such or looking into such type of conflict?
Okay. So as the Alumni Association, we've been doing mostly online work. But yeah, if you're talking about on-ground work, a lot of us, actually a lot of the alumni in Mumbai were involved very heavily in COVID relief. So that's something that we've been engaged with in terms of speaking to migrants, looking at how do we, of course, there was a lot of logistical involvement in trying to get them home. But besides that, we've also been trying to look at what are the systemic aspects that we can work with in terms of reversing migration, and looking at trying to see if we can create employability where they come from. So that's some of the work that some people have been engaged with. There are I know I'm not sure in Mumbai, but I know there are other alumni that are involved with the farmers agitation as well. Everything is political, right? So in that sense, when we talk of peace building, we can't really exclude politics from it. A lot of us were doing very active work around the CA and the NRC before the lockdown happened. So yes, a lot of our work is political. Political not from a leftist or a rightist or a central perspective, but political in the sense that, yes, there is engagement with the political system and with the government. So yeah, part of the work is around that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
How was your experience at the Chula Leongkong in Bangkok?
From an academic perspective, extremely enriching. One, because the faculty is great. They're practitioners who've done on-ground work. So what they share is not only academic or theoretical, but very practical as well. Two, also the peer group is absolutely valuable in terms of the kind of variety and the diversity of perspectives that they bring, and also the opportunity it gives us to actually sit across and in some ways at least start dialoguing. That process doesn't end there, but it at least starts there. For example, one of my closest friendships has been with this peace fellow from Pakistan who was in my batch, and we started off on a very tense note because at that point in time there was a lot happening at the border, and this person had a lot of questions around the Indian stance, and particularly because this person was also from a Kashmiri origin now in Pakistan, so there was a lot of sensitivity there. But over the years, the kind of dialogues that have happened between us have led to a lot of possibilities. We're now talking about how do we create engagement in a formal sense. So this fellow works with the National Defense University in Pakistan, and we're talking about how do we create perhaps academic engagement or engagement between schools and colleges in a way that we can start civilian engagement. So yeah, it's been a very enriching experience there.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I would like to ask one question here. That your experience of this peace education there, how it is different from the mainstream management education what we have here, and how we can incorporate the peace component of the mainstream education system. So, yeah, and what could be the course of action here in India?
So a large part of the work that I do in peace building, aside from dialogue, is around peace education. And well, it is radically different from management education. A lot of what we talk about from a conceptual perspective is around analyzing conflict, looking at how do we work with aspects of identity and gender and privilege and socioeconomic strata and all of that, and of course there's always political sensitivity around it. So it's a very layered approach to dealing with conflict in whatever context. So the context of peace education is quite agnostic. And so the kind of peace education work that I've been doing is I've been directing a peace fellowship program for adolescents and youth, largely from schools in Mumbai. With the intention, so what they do is they go through a year-long process of academic inputs and on-ground projects where they apply the concepts that they've learned. So some of my fellows are doing projects like working on caste conflict in terms of bringing together residents of a building, for example, and domestic servants, and looking at how does class and caste play out, and how do we start dialoguing in a way that we start bringing about on-ground change, the kind of discrimination that we see in the kind of spaces that we live in. For example, we have buildings with separate lifts for servants and so on, and what's the socio-political impact of it, and particularly when things get sensitive. For example, when there's a lockdown and they realize that, for example, a lot of our domestic staff realize that they perhaps had cousins and relatives that are on the roads and walking back home. And at the same time, they also see that there are people who are very comfortably ensconced in their houses with Wi-Fi in the lockdown. What's the impact of something like that? And how do we start dialoguing our way around it in a way that in the really long run, there is some degree of parity? This is, of course, not short-term work. We're talking about a couple of generations of work going forward, but it's a start. So yeah, peace education in that sense is a very practical, on-ground, and very uncomfortable work. It's not easy conversations, but it's conversations that need to be done.
Ma'am, tell me one thing. Have you all on your platform showcased the type of success that you all would have achieved on conflicts? Like Rotary showcases that what work they have done on polio, what work they have done on sanitation. Have you all showcased some real success stories which our peace fellows would have achieved?
I'm not sure if RI is doing it in a formal way. The Alumni Association website, in the recent last couple of months, they've started tracking some of it. I've seen some success stories displayed in the Alumni Facebook group. I'm not sure if it's going out to Rotary by itself. I know the Rotary magazine features some of it, but not so much.